You know, some civilizations rise and fall, and they're gone. But what if one just kept going? Imagine a culture that's seen empires crumble, survived unbelievable invasions, gone through massive revolutions, and somehow its soul is still intact. Well, that's the story of Iran. It's really less of a country and more of a cultural consciousness, like a phoenix, always rising from the ashes. So let's dive into this incredible 2,500-year journey together. So that's the big question we're tackling, right? How on earth has this Persian identity, this really powerful sense of self, managed to hang on through millennia of just constant upheaval? The answer, it turns out, is a fascinating story of adaptation and, well, these cultural threads that just refuse to break. To really get our heads around this story, we've got to focus on one single year, a huge turning point, 1501. Think of it like a dividing line in Iran's history. Everything before that year, that was the age of these vast Zoroastrian-influenced Persian empires. But everything after 1501, that's when we see the birth of Iran as a unified nation. And it's defined by a totally new, powerful identity, Shia Islam. Seriously, this one shift is the hinge that modern Iranian history swings on. So let's start at the beginning, right? Back in that age of ancient glory, long before the modern world even began to take shape, Iran was the beating heart of some of history's most magnificent superpowers. I mean, we're talking well over 1,000 years where this land was ruled by a whole succession of mighty empires. You had the Medes, who first brought the Iranian tribes together, then the legendary Achaemenids under Cyrus, and later on the Parthians and Sasanians, who were major rivals to Rome and Byzantium. This was an era of just immense power and prestige. And right at the heart of it all was this guy, Cyrus the Great. He had a truly revolutionary idea for his time. See, he wasn't just a conqueror. He saw himself as a liberator. He built the largest empire on Earth by actually respecting the people he ruled. Some even call his policies the world's first charter of human rights. So all of this created this incredibly powerful identity that defined Persia for over a millennium. It was a mix of immense imperial strength, the ethical teachings of Zoroastrianism, the whole idea of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, and of course, the enduring power of the Persian language. But that identity, it was about to face its greatest test yet. And that brings us to this period of conquest and survival, what you could really call its trial by fire. The first huge challenge to this identity came from waves of invasion that honestly threatened to extinguish the Persian spirit completely. First, you had the Arab conquest in the 7th century. That brought Islam and was the end of a Sasanian empire. Then, centuries later, the Mongol hordes just swept through in a catastrophe of almost unimaginable scale. Politically, Iran was completely shattered. But here's the crazy part. In both cases, Persian culture staged this kind of quiet counter-invasion. And this is where you see the core of Persian resilience right in action. So how did this happen? Well, the conquerors, they were militarily dominant, sure, but they often didn't have the sophisticated systems you need to run a huge empire. Persia, on the other hand, had centuries of experience. So guess who ran the new empires? Persian administrators. Persian scholars like Avicenna became absolute giants of the Islamic Golden Age. And poets writing in Farsi, like Rumi and Hafiz, created timeless masterpieces that made sure the language and spirit of Persia would never, ever die. It's wild. The conquerors would come and go, but they often left more Persian than when they arrived. Okay, so this brings us to the real climax of our story. The moment when this fractured, conquered land was reforged into something totally new, setting the stage for the Iran we know today. The year is 1501, and get this, the person who changes everything is a charismatic 14-year-old kid named Ismail. Yeah, 14. He leads this band of super devoted followers, marches right into the city of Tabriz, and makes a declaration that is going to change the course of history forever. Ismail declared Twelver Shia Islam, a very specific branch of the faith, as the official state religion. Now you have to understand that this was a radical move. At the time, most of the population was Sunni, just like the super powerful Ottoman Empire right next door. This wasn't just about changing beliefs. It was a brilliant strategic move to forge a unique national identity, to build a kind of cultural fortress around Iran that set it apart from all its rivals. The dynasty Ismail founded, the Safavids, basically laid the foundation for modern Iran. They're the ones who gave the country its unique Shia identity, they unified its territory, and under rulers like Shah Abbas the Great, they turned their new capital, Isfahan, into one of the most beautiful cities in the entire world. This was it. This was the moment modern Iran was truly born. So, with this new Shia Persian identity locked in place, Iran steps into the modern era, which turns out to be a really turbulent period of facing off against European colonial powers, wrestling with modernity, and then ultimately plunging into revolution. The last couple hundred years have just been a whirlwind. You had the weakening Qajar dynasty, which gave way to Iran's first shot at democracy. Then, in 1925, the Pahlavi dynasty takes over, and they are determined to modernize Iran at lightning speed. This all leads up to the Shah's White Revolution, a whole series of top-down reforms that dramatically changed society but also created some really deep divisions. So the Shah's vision was for a secular, Western-style powerhouse. He used all that oil money to build up industries and cities. He gave women the right to vote. He even banned the veil. He wanted to build what he called a great civilization, and he was looking to the West and ancient Persia for his inspiration. But there was a very powerful countervision. Ayatollah Khomeini, an exiled cleric, argued that the Shah was basically erasing Iran's religious soul. He called for an Islamic Republic, a government that would resist foreign influence and put the values of Shia Islam right back at the center of national life. And in 1979, his vision won. Ever since 1979, Iran has been the world's only theocracy. It survived a brutal 8-year war with Iraq and decades of international sanctions. But it's also a country of deep, deep complexities. There's this constant tension between the state's authority and a young, super tech-savvy population that keeps pushing for change, which we've seen in major protest movements over the years. So, after all of that empire, conquest, revolution, what's left? What is that unbreakable thread that ties the Iran of today all the way back to the Persia of 2,500 years ago? It's this stuff. It's celebrating Nowruz, the spring equinox, a tradition that's way older than Islam. It's the Farsi language, which carries the epic poems of Ferdowsi right in its DNA. It's that deep pride in ancient sites like Persepolis. It's a culture so powerful that it now produces Oscar-winning films and fuels debates on social media. The political systems change, but that cultural flame? It just never goes out. From a Zoroastrian empire to a Shia republic, from Cyrus the Great to the supreme leader, Iran has always found a way to adapt, to survive, to endure. So the question, really, isn't if this eternal flame will keep burning, but what shape it's going to take in its next chapter.